having A weeks forever and ever, and now it's a B week. That means that you just have formatives today and Wednesday. You don't have a formative on Friday because Friday is a B day. Progress reports go in this Friday for the second 6 weeks. So I think that I should have everything up to date by then. There's a homework assignment that y'all turned in yesterday, so I'll grade that this week. I've already updated the quiz grades. If you did the re-quiz for the poetry terms, those grades aren't turning out real great. Maybe we should take some time to go through that material next week. But some people did gain 10 or 15 points on the re-quiz, but I don't know what it is there that's giving people trouble. So maybe we'll go through that quiz together next week just to make sure everybody's got a handle on the terminology. The semester exam is going to have all the terminology from all the pages that we've been reading. And then I'm also going to give you like a new poem and ask you to write about it on the semester exam using your terminology and so on. So I don't want to just move on from the quiz if, I don't even think there were any A's. I think the highest were B's. So I'm not too comfortable with that. So I think next week we'll go through that quiz together, and that way you can get, solid notes on those sections. But I did put the new grades in. If you re-quizzed and your grade was better, then I've already replaced that grade in the grade book, so you can check that out. If you didn't do the re-quiz, then the grade is the same. I don't know what to tell you on that. Let me see. You should have turned in these assignments this week. You should have done the poetry re-quiz. We had an analysis for the poem The Inheritance, and there were 2 videos to watch on poetic elements. The videos, I could make assignments for the videos. I could do an ed puzzle where you have to turn in questions, but maybe you haven't figured it out yet, probably already have. I'm not a big, here's the thing, answer the questions type of person. I want to see your ideas about what you're reading. I could ask you the questions that are in the book after the passages and you turn them in, and I don't know. I just find that a really old-fashioned way to talk about literature and do things about literature. I'd rather ask formative questions, get feedback on there. I'd rather talk about it in class or, just see your notes later on. I might just ask you to take a picture of your poem or something like that. Do this one assignment, that kind of thing. So I'm not a big read this and answer the questions type person. If we were in class, I probably would have had you do this 1, 2, 3 analysis with a partner in class or like a small group. Or maybe you would come in with it already done and I'd ask you to like have a conversation with the people nearby or get in a small group and have a discussion. And while you're discussing, I would come around and talk to you about it, like see what you guys did and like that. But it's not easy to do in this situation. But the videos were there just to supplement, just to help you learn. I feel like, learning is sometimes its own reward. There'll be grades, but everything that I ask you to do will ultimately result in better grades. So hope you can see that. Seniors, just a few reminders. The counselors are coming in on Wednesday. If you have not completed your FAFSA, then you should set aside some time on Wednesday. It's during this class time, so they'll be coming in. I'm going to be putting you in a room with your actual counselor, I think. I don't know how many counselors they're sending. Just like we did with Applied Texas, and they're going to help you finish up your FAFSA. Remember, the goal for that is the end of the month. If you're already done, you don't need to come to the meeting on Wednesday if you've already submitted, but do email your counselor so they're not looking for you, because they will have to track you down and check you off of their little list. It's like part of their responsibility to make sure that you did FAFSA. So if you're already done, just let them know. Just send them an email and let them know. Otherwise, I will see you on Wednesday. I'm going to send a link out tomorrow evening. It's a new link. It's not this class link because they've got my A day and my B day students all together on Wednesday. So I just made a new link for that. So I'll send the new link out tomorrow and it will be a reminder to you seniors anyway. Also remember that yearbook picks are this week, Thursday and Friday. You should have received an email already with your time and day. I think they're doing it alphabetically. It seemed to me like people were saying that it was alphabetically. So if you have not received an email and you want to be in the yearbook, you should probably email the journalism teacher. Here is her email right here in case something happened and you didn't get your notification. You can check into that. I think that's it for updates. I can't think of anything else. Is there anything else that you guys can think of for updates I'm forgetting. They're going to try to do homecoming court. There was a tweet earlier today. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Usually I try to retweet that stuff. Homecoming candidates. So I guess you can see the candidates for homecoming court, and then I'm guessing that they're going to have a vote later on. So they're trying to do all the things, all the normal things in the abnormal situation, I guess we could say. But there's a link here. You can go to the link and look at your homecoming court there. Where was I? Oh, yeah. I can't think of anything else for updates. I try to just collect them there as the week goes on so that I have them all there for you. Today, I want to go over, maybe you want to get out your notebook or something like that. I want to go over writing an AP analytical response for poetry. We did that for short fiction. We were writing a paragraph on AP Classroom where you had 2 passages and you had to write a paragraph and it was timed. We have another one of those this week, but it's on poetry. So there'll be 2 poems, and I gave you 55 minutes this time because poetry takes a little bit longer to work through. So you'll have 55 minutes, but 2 poems and 2 different essay questions that you'll have to write a paragraph for. So I just thought that maybe today I would do a little demo about how to go about doing that. I know a lot of people talked about their issue was the time frame and how it's hard to write a really good paragraph when you're limited in your time, but we have to practice that because that's how the AP exam is. That 45 minutes per question goes by really fast. So I don't know if I should mention this because it's early. Well, by the time I mention it, I should just mention it, right? I don't like it when people do that to me. I did get an email today from the College Board. I read the AP exams. I don't know if I ever told you that. I score them for the College Board. So this past year we did it virtually. The year before that we would go to Salt Lake City, and the reading is in Salt Lake City, and we would sit there in a room with 1,000 other professors and high school teachers and just literally sit there and grade papers. It takes 7 days. I think it's like almost 1 million essays, like literally. Yeah, I know, it's a headache. But anyway, what I wanted to say was that I got an email today that they're going to have the reading virtual again in the spring. Now, in my mind, that's okay because the reading happens in June. But that makes me wonder if they're going to have a full test for you guys or not. Last year, what they did was they took the whole test, multiple choice, the 55 questions and the 3 essays, and they brought it down to 1 essay question. And if you took the language test last year, you know that happened also with most of the topics. If you took any AP exam, you know that's pretty much what they did. They're still officially saying that it's going to be a full test, but I don't know. Now that they've changed the reading officially to be virtual, so I don't know. Just a heads up on that. In any case, we'll keep practicing, and even if they do have 1 question, you still only get 45 minutes, or I think it was 50 minutes plus, you know, including the upload time. So I want to make sure that we can manage that. And I know that it's hard for some of you. I know I'm not good with time either. I want my words to be right. I want to check it all out, but we're working on it. So I'm going to come back and do that lesson in a minute, but let me go through the assignments for the week because I have a separate PowerPoint for that little tutorial. So this week, I want you to review for the progress check. There are 3 things that you can do for that. There already said there'll be 2 poems, and I've given you 55 minutes on the AP Classroom to complete the 2 paragraphs. Obviously, they're going to ask you to look for the things that we've been studying. So they're going to ask you to write about comparison or speaker, or those things that we've been incorporating into our study of poetry. So go over your notes from the textbook that I've assigned to you. I assigned 4 videos on the AP Classroom. I'm not grading you on those, but I do think that hearing another teacher sometimes talk about things can be helpful to you. So you can watch those videos. They're all under like 8 minutes. So there's one that talks about metaphor. There's another one that talks about structure. There's one that is about, I think the third one's simile. And then there's one about like writing the essay, tips for that. So, you know, if you want to look at those, feel free. I did assign them just so that you could look at them. Some teachers give grades on whether or not you watch the videos, but I don't think watching a video necessarily means that you paid attention to it or learned anything. So they're just there to help you. And then also I did another optional practice, just like I did with the short fiction. If you want to, by Thursday, you can submit to me a practice test. I put it down here. It's in the review poetry section. So if you want to, right here on this Google Forms under review poetry, these are like the 3 review tasks that you can do before you do your, what do they call it, progress check. If you want to, you can do a practice one. Obviously, I've already looked at the questions that are on AP Classroom. I already know what they're going to ask you. So I made a practice one that's very similar. It's a different poem, but it's asking you a very similar task. So if you want to, between now and Thursday, you can go to this Google form. And it's going to, actually, I made 2 different prompts because, you know, they're the 2 different questions that are going to be on the test. You can pick which one you want to practice, and it will take you to the passage, and you can do it right there on that Google form. If you submit to me by Thursday, then I'll give you some feedback. It's optional, so it's not a grade, but I think it will affect your performance on the practice. So if you do that by Thursday, then I'll give you some feedback. I think there were 6 or 7 people that took advantage of that on the short fiction, and those people tended to do pretty well. So keep that in mind, that those are the things that you can do to make sure that you do a good job on the progress check. And then the progress check is here. I put all the links here for you. And I kind of made each assignment a separate thing. So I think that needs to be done by the 24th, which is Saturday. So if you do the practice test, then I'll get feedback back to you on Friday, and then you still have Saturday to do the review. I mean, the progress check. The other thing for this week, if I scale back up here, is, yeah. So the other thing is to start preparing for our reading of the Metamorphosis. The Metamorphosis is a work that we're going to be reading in translation, and I'm going to assign the first chapter next week. So it's in your book. We're going to read all 3 chapters. It's not very long. It's, you know, like maybe 35 pages total. It's what they call a novella, like a mini novel. Here in the Valley, we have novella means something different, but I used to watch them all the time with Mr. Ramos's grandmother. In any case, we're gonna practice by doing some vocab. So I isolated some vocabulary on vocabulary.com so that you can practice some of the words that you'll be running into when you read chapter 1. And then also some background information. So assignment number 3 down here is to learn some vocabulary. I think it will just be easier for you, so you don't have to like be reading, stop, look it up, go back. You'll already be familiar with the words. So next week I'll give you some words on chapter 2 when you're reading chapter 1, and you'll just always kind of like be assimilating those words into your reading. Hopefully that will be helpful for you. So you will need to join the class in vocab.com. I put the link here. Let's move these here. I put the link there for you. And I also made a list because sometimes people would just like to have a list of the words. There are 20 words. So they're listed here in case you want to make a copy of this document and use it for your own study purposes or making your own definitions or whatever. But those are the same words that are going to be in this vocabulary.com. I don't know if you guys have done vocabulary.com before, but it's just going to run you through the words in a practice kind of format, so that you're familiar with them. There will be a quiz later on of the words in context. So usually I like to just put a sentence with the word in it, and you have to choose what the word means. But mainly the important thing is that you can smoothly read the assignment that I'm giving you from the book. And then the last thing for this week is to read and take notes about the background material for the Metamorphosis. I don't think it's very long. There's some stuff about the author. There's a little bit about the setting. You know, it's like 2.5 pages. So just background, it's good to know a little bit about what you're going to be reading. The Metamorphosis is not a difficult piece to read, but it is difficult philosophically. So it's a little bit of a strange story. I don't want to do any spoilers, because I think that's what keeps you reading, is when, you know, you don't really know, you have to read to figure out what's going to be happening. But it's a little bit of a strange story, and but it's not that hard to read. All right, let me go back to our lesson for today. I wanted to go through this demo and give you some notes on how you can write about poetry analytically, you know, like you'll need to do on the progress check this week. So I made a little PowerPoint. You should have access to it. So if you need to go back to it later, you can, but let me walk you through it. And I'm going to be using the poem that you read for this week, The Inheritance. So I like to use poems for examples that you've already read, because then we don't have to spend time figuring them all out. You should have already done a 1, 2, 3 analysis on The Inheritance for today. So I'm going to use that as the basis for my example while we're going through just things to think about so that you can make sure you're doing a good progress check this week. I think that it's important to talk about the difference between how you approach a poem when you have a timed situation versus when you have an untimed situation. Because yes, you're still looking at a poem, but the process is different, because when you're in a time situation, there's just a whole different set of circumstances that make you have to make decisions about the poem in a faster way than if it's untimed. You know, if you have a homework assignment, you can look at the poem a little bit today and, you know, finish looking at it tomorrow. Or if you have to write a essay that's due in 2 weeks, you can take a long time to really work out that piece. You have time to do like a 1, 2, 3 analysis in full and really think it through and play around with the words, like I was doing the other day with the demo when I was introducing the 1, 2, 3 analysis. You can make a more complicated thesis or claim. You can really look at the details and really, you know, perfect your thesis before you turn it in. You can also make a longer response and more examples from the text if you don't have a time situation. But when we're practicing for the AP exam, we have to be in a time situation. I wouldn't be doing a very good job if I gave you unlimited time in all the practices, and then it comes May and you're used to an hour and a half luxurious time looking at poetry, and it's like, oh, you have 45 minutes. So we have to keep that timed element there so you're used to it. Now, here are some tips for that, because a lot of people told me that was their main problem. I asked a formative about that. How did it go? What do you think were your strengths and weaknesses? So a lot of people told me that they think they could have done better if they had more time. Well, sure, that's true for most things. That's why they're trying to limit you to see who can still rise above that difficulty, that obstacle. So here are my tips for that. If there's more than one poem, I'm already telling you that there's going to be 2 on your progress check, then you should divide your time. So you should say to yourself, okay, if I know that I have 55 minutes, then that means I need to spend only half that time on the first one and then move on. If I have time at the end, I can go back and fix it up if I need to. But what happens sometimes is they go ahead and spend 40 minutes on one passage and then barely have any time to do the second one. So in your mind, kind of break up whatever time frame you have among how many ever poems you have to look at. In this case, it's going to be 2. So you should be thinking, you know, 25 minutes each, and kind of keep an eye on the time so that you don't go over with one and then not have enough time to do the other. What if the second one's even tougher than the first one? And then you're kind of, maybe you can read it, or maybe you won't get to a idea about it fast enough. And so divide up your time. Also make sure that you look at the title. The title, as we see in several of the poems that we've looked at, is crucial and really helpful in understanding the poem. Lots of times it's sort of like the topic of the poem, and like The Inheritance. Well, the topic of that poem is inheritance. And from the topic, I can always get that theme or that poetic idea. So sometimes the poet will just give it to you. And so it's just important to look at the title and give it some thought. You do have time in a time situation to do a quick 1, 2, 3. Because it's online, it's sort of visual, but you can have a notebook there. You can jot down ideas. You can, you know, say, you know, there's 3 similes, or jot a note about the structure or whatever. I would say do a quick 1, 2, 3 sort of based on what they're asking you to look for in the poem, because the question will be there. So whatever they're asking you to look at in the poem, kind of just focus your 1, 2, 3 on that. You don't have to notice everything. If they don't ask you about comparison and they're asking you about speaker, then you can just wave at those metaphors as they go by, right? Like, okay, I'm not writing about you. I see you simile, but you know, you're just helping me understand the poem right now. I need to understand the speaker because that's what they're asking me to write about. So you can do your 1, 2, 3 focused on that way. Your goal is sort of a solid understanding of the poem, not a complete understanding of the poem, because that would take too long. So just keep in mind that it's not going to be as thorough of a look at the poem as it would be if you had an untimed situation. If it's homework, if it's an essay, something like that, then I would be expecting for you to spend as much time as you needed to figure out the poem. But we don't have that option in the timed. You just have to focus on answering the prompt. I'm going to demonstrate that for you today with some example prompts for the inheritance. But are there any questions about that? Maybe it's sort of obvious, I don't know. I wanted to spend some time talking about that because I think almost everybody said that the time was a factor for them. So practice helps, but you know, maybe also these tips. Okay, the most important step when you have to write about poetry, whether it's in a timed or an untimed situation, is making an interpretation that answers what the prompt is asking. There were some people who wrote beautiful paragraphs when we were doing our progress check on short fiction, but then when I read their paragraph, it really didn't answer the question. They talked about, you know, the metaphor in the passage, not characterization of the little girl. So I can't give points to that because part of the rubric when you're scoring AP answers is to make sure, I mean, it has to be answering the question. So I'm going to talk to you today about how you can isolate that and focus yourself on just answering that topic. So it's going to be your opinion on whatever it is that they ask you to write about. Maybe they're going to ask you to write about a speaker or a comparison or the structure of the poem. So you have to form a theory about that. And that's where 1, 2, 3 can really help you. Do a quick 1, 2, 3. Maybe you're not going to really read it 3 times, but you're going to make sure that you look for the basics, that you look for the figurative language, and then you look for meaning. Until you get to meaning, it's going to be hard for you to write anything about the poem, really. But this is the main thing. If you can write an interpretation that answers what the prompt is asking, then that's your claim. And that goes in the first part of the paragraph. It can be your first sentence. But if you don't have that, then you're going to be wandering all over with your answer. And you're just going to sort of be sitting there going, what else can I put? Oh, there's a simile. And you'll just write it in there, but it's not connected to what they asked you to write about. So that's not going to get you too many points. So here's an example. If you want to, why don't you bring up your copy of the poem that you did for homework? Can you still see them after you submit them? You can still see the document, right? I don't know if you can write on them, but you could still see the poem, right? Well, I have it copied here in this PowerPoint. We'll get to it, but you might want to have it side by side so you can kind of look and see what you did. So here's an example prompt that you might see on a progress check or on the AP exam for that poem. It says, in the following poem by Kelvin B. Parker, published in 2020, they will give you the publication information a lot of times because you're supposed to like sort of think to yourself, okay, well, that's modern, you know, it's contemporary, I'm going to understand it. Or published in 1752, you have to prepare yourself for some Shakespearean type stuff, right? The speaker comments on social classes in America. Read the poem carefully. Write a paragraph in which you make a defensible claim regarding how Parker uses metaphor to convey a complex view of these classes. In your paragraph, you should incorporate at least one piece of evidence from the text to support your claim. So what I did was I took the format that we see these prompts written in, and I just made one for the poem that you looked at this past week. So let's go through it a little bit and, well, let me read the poem first and just to refresh your memory. And then I'm gonna go through the prompt and talk to you about the information that's given and how to focus on what they're asking you to do. So this is the poem here, The Inheritance by Kelvin B. Parker. Some inherit wealth, some inherit an entitlement to a lavish estate with a gated driveway and surrounded by gorgeous green landscape. Some inherit access to a trust fund. Birth is a coronation for a life of privilege entry to a back door for opportunities accrued from 400 years of using lives for cheap labor. Some inherit generational pain, an endowment immediately set up after birth, with emotional trauma dispersed over the course of their childhood, and a lump sum of struggles paid once they reach the age of maturity. Some inherit a subhuman status. Instead of being treated as people, they are called gorilla and ape. Some inherit bruises on the soul, passed down from one generation to the next like a sacred language. Birth is an inauguration to a lifetime of economic challenges and unjust impoverishment, like filling used plastic jugs with water taken from a gas station spigot and then boiling it just to bathe. The pursuit of happiness is a constant struggle for survival. The quest for the American dream is unwillingly diverted to a tiresome scavenger hunt for equality. Some inherit ancestral burdens and are heirs to indignities. Instead of being left assets, they are left beneficiaries of refurbished identities, stripped from any tribal connection. Instead of being left property, they are in line of succession to acquire a fragmented citizenship in a country that once classified them as property. Some inherit the misfortune of being born free, but die fighting for their lives to matter. Okay, I felt like that was a pretty relevant poem, given the uprisings that we've seen in our country and some of the issues that we see on the table with this election that's coming up. So I felt like it was a good one to use. Also, this poem has an abundance of comparisons. Lots of metaphors. There's an extended metaphor in the poem of the inheritance, and then there's also some smaller metaphors and similes. By the way, it doesn't matter when they say comparisons whether you deal with metaphor or simile. Simile is a type of metaphor, really, so you can just say comparison, or you can use them, but you don't have to be really specific about this is a simile and this is a metaphor. I know they probably talked to you about that in the past, but anyway, where was I? I want to go back. In any case, let's go ahead. So let's look at the prompt again. This is that same prompt. There are some sections of this prompt that I want to point out to you, because sometimes people don't spend much time on the prompt at all. And if you do spend time on the prompt, a few minutes to look at it and really figure out what they're going for, then it will be beneficial to you so that you can focus on what they're asking you to write about. Like I said, some people wrote really great paragraphs, but it wasn't on the topic that it was asking for. So, that's not really a defensible claim if it's not on the topic. So the first thing that they will usually put in the prompt is some sort of background information. You'll get the author, the publication. That doesn't really help you write the essay, but usually they will also drop a little piece of information to help you kind of like orient yourself to the poem before you start reading. Here we have the speaker comments on social classes in America. It doesn't say what his comments are. You have to read the poem and interpret that for yourself, but at least it's giving you a little frame of reference so that when you start reading the poem, you're like, oh, okay, social classes, let me think about that, okay. And you can kind of like, from everything, narrow it down to some topic. So that's helping you, because if you read that, then you at least know the direction that the poem is going. And if you don't see that in the poem, then you're off, because they're already telling you that's a function that's present in the poem, all right? Then you're going to see the main task. And isolating that is important, because that will make it so that you know what to write about in your response. In this case, the main task is write a paragraph in which you make a defensible claim or a thesis regarding how Parker uses metaphor to convey a complex view of these classes. Now, I tell people all the time that if it's hard for you to figure out what you want to say about a passage in your response, here's what you do. You take that main task and you turn it into a question, right? The answer to that question then is your thesis or your claim. So if I have the main task, write a paragraph in which you make a defensible claim regarding how Parker uses metaphor to convey a complex view of these classes, I can turn that into a couple different questions. I could say, how does the poem use metaphor to show a complex view of these classes? Question mark. And when I answer that question, that's my interpretation. But I also have to identify what is the complex view. So another question could be, what is the view that he has of these classes? So if it helps you to focus, then you can take a second on your time situation and just sort of ask yourself, like make a little note and turn that task into a question. When you can answer that question, then you're ready to go with your paragraph. I think in the next unit, the paragraphs start turning into multi-paragraph. Obviously, we're working toward an essay. So we're starting off with paragraphs, but we'll be building. So yeah, you can just turn that around and ask a question. And once you answer that question, then you know that you're ready to approach writing your response. The last thing is the minor task. So most of the time on these practices, the minor task is always the same. They want you to use a piece of evidence, at least one piece from the text. So you should be quoting at least something from the poem. I don't think that's a new thing. I think you've been doing that since, like STAR tests were born. So I don't think that's a new thing, but make sure that you can bring in evidence to support your claim. You can't do that until you know what your answer is to the questions that you produced from the main task. You shouldn't be choosing evidence before you know what you're trying to support, if that makes sense. All right, so let's look at a couple of defensible claims, because there were a number of people who had a decent claim, but it could be better. So if you ended up with, 4 out of 6 points on that first practice for short fiction, and you want to try to get a 6 out of 6, because the program is going to start, now that we're doing our second progress check. I don't know if you do these in other classes, other AP classes or not. They have them, but I don't know if your teachers are doing them. It will start tracking your skills. So over time, as we do more of these practices on AP Classroom, it will start tracking what your strengths and weaknesses are with the material that we do for our exam. So I'm always trying to give tips on how you can improve. If you had a decent score, but you need to get those couple more points, I gave you some feedback last time on how you could get them, but I also wanted to point out the difference between an okay claim, works, and a complex claim that's going to get full points if you can support it. So regarding the topic here, right? Write a paragraph in which you make a defensible claim regarding how Parker uses metaphor to convey a complex view of these classes. Well, the word complex is right here. So if your claim is not complex, you'll get points. I mean, you may do all right on the response and the AP exam, but if they're asking you for a complex view of the classes or a complex view of the character or the situation or whatever, you should try to add to your claim to make it more complex itself, right? So here's one that is a pretty common, decent answer to the prompt, right? This would be a good thesis statement for a paragraph on this topic. Parker uses the concept of inheritance to create a metaphor for the social status of people in America. Well, that's true. In the poem, he talks about how there's like literal inheritance, money that wealthy people get, people with privilege, and how they inherit property and privilege and those sorts of things. But then the inheritance that other people get is much more grim and much more challenging for their lives. So this is an okay claim. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not very deep or very perceptive. Pretty much anybody who reads the poem, if they read it, would probably figure that out. Sort of obvious in the poem. So how do we add complexity to our claim? Well, I can think about the details that happen in the poem, and I can say, well, besides the metaphor of inheritance, there's also the concept of birth that's present. Every class that's discussed in that poem also has, like, they're born into their situation. So there's this concept of inheritance, but also birth. And so I added that here to sort of like bump up the complexity level of that claim. And also added this part, the metaphor that demonstrates the imbalance of the social status. Up here, we're just identifying social status. Okay, these people are rich. Okay, these people are poor. I'm done with my paragraph. You know, that's going to get you a couple of points. But if you want to move up and not be a couple of points type of student, then I'm trying to demonstrate how you could, you know, increase that complexity here. In this case, it's true that he's putting sort of like the haves and the have-nots next to each other by demonstrating what they inherit. And it's demonstrating the imbalance of social status in our society. So I'm taking it to the next level by explaining that complexity in the poem. And so automatically when I read an essay at the AP scoring or a paragraph that you guys are writing on the AP classroom, if I read this one, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe they'll work themselves into some complexity in the response, and they may or may not. But if it starts with something like this, I already know that we're off to the races, because figuring that out in a short period of time to write the paragraph shows great skill. So is this easy? No, it's not easy. But I'm trying to give you things to think about so that you can start, you know, pushing yourself into that realm. So here's an example paragraph response. And you'll notice that I've highlighted certain things specifically. This is the same thesis as the previous slide, the one that's more complex. But you'll see that sprinkled throughout are some pale yellow words, and that's because those are key words that are present in this claim, this thesis. And so if I'm writing a response that's proving the claim, then everything that I put under it will respond to that claim and be an example of that claim. I think sometimes people, when we get nervous, when we're not sure that we read the passage 100% because of time, we start just putting in whatever we can think of. Oh, there's a simile on line 4. Can I connect it to the idea of imbalance of social status? No, but I can write a sentence about it, right? And so then what starts happening is the paragraph sort of goes in different directions and it's not focused. So you should be able to, or maybe keep a mind to it when you're writing, certain words that are crucial to your claim should be popping up throughout your response as you're making your point. If none of the words from here, or words that mean the same thing, are popping up in your answer, then there's a good chance that you're off topic, your support. So the reason that I'm going to read it in a second, but that's the reason I highlighted these, because we're talking about birth and inheritance as concepts that help to create a metaphor, but then also the imbalance of social status. So those 3 words show up frequently in this answer. And that's why this is a good response that is complex and also focused throughout. So here's our thesis claim. Parker uses the concepts of birth and inheritance to create a metaphor that demonstrates the imbalance of social status of people in America. There are those who are coronated at birth like royalty into entitlement and privilege. Those are all words that I pulled out of the poem, right? Who along with their wealth also automatically inherit entry to a back door for opportunities. This is almost a literal explanation of what occurs for most of the elite of American citizens. Parker contrasts this, though, here's where we get to the imbalance, right? With the inheritance of those who were not lucky enough to be born with these advantages. These Americans inherit generational pain, emotional trauma, and subhuman status, the opposite of the privileged. They endure bruises on the soul from which they cannot recover and cannot pursue the American dream because they must first gain an identity and equality. Parker's metaphor of inheritance works to show the imbalance present in American society by contrasting those who gain benefits at birth and those who inherit burdens. So what I'm hoping you notice here is that both types of people that are mentioned in the poem are supported with quotations and ideas from the poem itself. And those ideas of birth, inheritance, and imbalance are present throughout the entire response. Anything that's not talking about that does not belong in the paragraph. Now, we already have people in class who write like this. There are people who are already doing this. So I'm trying to encourage them to like sort of stay on that path. And then the people who are, you know, sort of almost getting there, I'm hoping that this example helps you this week when you do your next progress check, giving you some tips and some practical things to do with the poems that you'll encounter on that. So are there any questions about this little overview? I don't think I have any more slides. You can post a question or you can unmute yourself. Maybe go back and look at this when you're getting ready to do the progress check, right? Just to refresh your memory about what I was talking about. I'll put the video up too, like I do for all of our class periods. But I think that if you keep those things in mind, it can really benefit you on the progress check overall. I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, well, I already went over the assignments for this week. Let me see about due dates. The practice response is the first thing besides the formatives that you need to do this week. And that is due Thursday if you want feedback. So if you want to do a practice run, then that's up to you. I do think that the people who do the practice runs end up doing better on the checks anyway, but you know, the more practice, the better. Some people put on there that they want more practice, so here you go. And then also make sure that you do that progress check. That needs to be done by Saturday midnight. I think I have it shutting off on Saturday night. So am I saying you have to do it on Saturday? No, you can do it on today if you want. It should be open. So you don't have to wait. A lot of people are like, oh, I had to work on Saturday. Well, that's good. Just plan your time. You know, I know you've got other classes, but I'm trying to leave it open as long as possible for you. So, and then there's the vocab, and also, do you want me to run you through? Why don't you all go ahead right now and go to assignment number 3 on the list here. I want to make sure that you can all join the class for vocabulary.com because it's the first time we're using it. I do like to use vocabulary.com to help you practice word lists for things that we're going to be reading. And we'll be reading more complex things throughout the year, but click right here where it says join the class. Oh, I already signed up, obviously. But it's going to ask you to join. Use your Google credentials to join. And then if you've never been on vocabulary.com, what it will do is over here, there'll be a notification here. Okay. When you have an assignment. So I didn't set it up like a test. I set it up just as a practice. So I'm not grading the practice. The practice is for you to learn your words. And you do have a word list on that doc that I was showing you earlier. So this will just run you through different questions. And if you don't know, like if you're looking at this question, which of the following lines would most likely be spoken plaintively? If you don't know that vocabulary word, then you can either do a 50-50, which is where they reduce the number of choices, word in the wild, or they'll give you a definition and then you can choose the right one. Because this is all just practice. I'm grading you on a quiz next week. I'm not grading you on how you do on this practice because you're just learning. But there's questions in the chat. Hold on. I see where it is in the classroom. I can't see where it is in the classroom. Oh, okay. So yeah, I put everything on a separate assignment. So if you go to, like in the instructions, the assignments for this week are numbered. So it's assignment number 3. So down below that where it says assignment number 3, that's where the link is, down here. So was everybody able to sign in to vocabulary? Very good. I think it's like $129 a year to have an account that lets me see what your percentages are on your practices. And I already pay for a few other things like formative and some other things. So I just use the free version of vocabulary.com and you can practice your words. And then I'll probably make next week, there'll probably be a quiz over that background material for metamorphosis and these words, and I'll put it on formative because otherwise it only gives you the percentage. If you do it on vocabulary.com, it only gives you the percentage for the top 3 students, and I'm pretty sure everybody wants a grade on the quiz. So navigating vocabulary.com is pretty easy. It will tell you up here if you have an assignment to do. It'll be listed here. And so what it does is just walks you through a couple different activities, questions. They're only 20 words, so I'll click on something and it will tell me right away, is that right or wrong? And the whole point is you're just trying to learn the words. If you don't want to do vocabulary.com, you can just use that list to find the words and study them. I mean, whatever works for you. But you know, then it gives you the answer right here, and then over here it will explain the word to you so that you can start to learn it. Then that word will come up again in the sequence of options down here. There's different rounds that you can go through. And so the 20 words just kind of keep cycling through with different ways that they're asking you about the words. Like say the next one. Impede means to, well, if I know that one, I can click on it, right? And it will say, nice job. And then it will give me a definition that I can pay attention to. You could go to that doc then and put in the definition for yourself if you want. Or make a note in your notebook, whatever it takes you to study the words. Like I want you to study them in a way that makes sense to you, but you do need to learn the definitions for these words, any ones that you don't already know. So there'll be just different things and you just go through, and then at the end you can see that the different rounds are scoring down here how I'm doing, and it will give you your overall percentage as you practice those 20 words. So you should be able next week to pass a quiz where I ask you to use these words or match them to the right definition, or you know, like put them in the right sentence or something like that. Okay. If you're having trouble getting into vocabulary.com, just send me an email, but it probably looks like most people are getting in there. Let me look at my classes. We should start listing everybody in there. I'm gonna put Mr. Ramos in there as a practice. Okay, yeah, it looks like most people are getting in there. Yeah, so that's going to be a practice for you. So what? Anyway, just so you understand, it's to help you do better on your quiz. And then the last thing is just go through this PDF and make some notes. If you like to do everything virtual, you can use a PDF marker, or you can just do notes in your notebook, whatever way you like. I like to use Kami. When I open a PDF, you can download, it's free, you can download the Chrome extension Kami, K-A-M-I, and it will allow you to annotate a PDF. So if you'd rather do marginal notes, you don't want to print it out, then you can do text boxes and, you know, type in notes on the side. You can highlight stuff. You can use all these tools over here. And then you can save it. So then when you're done, you can download it, you can save it, you can share it to your Google Drive, print it. I don't think anybody prints things anymore really, but oh, you know what Mario told me? Mario called this weekend. Y'all know Mario Trevino, I'm sure. He's at West Point, and he said that when the students are mad about a rule, they throw their printers out the window. I don't know. Anyway, so you can use that tool, but whatever way you need to. So there'll be questions on the quiz that are from this. Probably these will be like true false questions about the background of the author, and then the vocab. So there'll be a quiz next week on those two things. I'm telling you right now so that you can do good notes and study and be prepared. Okay? I can't think of anything else that I need to address with you. I can't think of anything else that I could give you that would help you with that process. So if there aren't any questions, that's pretty much it for today. Is there anything that anybody wants to mention or ask?